Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room was filled with the sharp scent of polished steel and coffee gone cold, yet all eyes were fixed on one man, the loudest voice in the room. Someone had just said it. Someone get this one a chair before she breaks a hip trying to teach real soldiers how to fight. The laughter that followed wasn't real. It was tight, nervous, the kind that hides fear behind noise. Boots shifted on the concrete floor. A few cadets glanced down, unsure whether to laugh or not. But most did, not out of cruelty but out of instinct. The voice that led it belonged to Sergeant First Class Evans, a man carved from old-school arrogance and battlefield bluster. His jaw was square, his haircut perfect, his chest adorned with decades-old ribbons he still wore like shields. The kind of man who believed authority was volume and experience meant domination. He smirked, looking across the observation deck toward the woman at the console. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even flinch. Her name was Sharma, and silence was her weapon. To the cadets standing in that bright, echoing room, she looked out of place. A civilian contractor in simple black fatigues with no rank insignia, no medals, no swagger. Only a calmness that made people uncomfortable. But what drew the eye, what drew the whispers, were the two subtle seams just below her knees, where fabric met matte black carbon fiber. They didn't know what those legs had walked through. They only saw what was missing. Evans made sure of that. "We're training fighters here," he said, packing with his hands clasped behind his back, voice booming across the glass-paneled deck. "Men and women who can carry their brothers when the bullets fly, not data analysts who couldn't hack it in the real world." It was meant to sting, and it did, not to her but to everyone else who felt their skin crawl from the weight of the disrespect. The cadets shifted again, unsure if they should agree, unsure if they were witnessing something they'd regret later. She didn't respond, not with words. Instead, she adjusted a small holoscreen, fingers gliding over the light interface with quiet precision. Each motion was deliberate, no wasted energy, no need to prove anything. The faint hum of the Crucible, the Academy's most advanced combat simulation facility, filled the air around her. And still silence. From the corner of the room, Colonel Davies watched. His posture was sharp, but his eyes, they carried the weight of someone who had seen too much, lost too many. He studied the woman everyone underestimated, and something about the way she stood, balanced, centered, immovable, sent a quiet chill through him. He knew that stance. He'd seen it once before, years ago, in a different kind of war. He knew he was watching someone dangerous. Evans clapped his hands once loudly. "All right, listen up, cadets. This is your final certification trial. I expect nothing less than textbook execution. Let's show our guest here how real soldiers handle combat." He made sure she heard the emphasis. The cadets nodded, adrenaline pumping, eager to prove themselves. They were young, sharp, conditioned to equate volume with strength, speed with control. None of them noticed the way Anna's eyes traced the glowing tactical map on the display wall, a modular cityscape built inside the Crucible, filled with blind corners, simulated threats, and the kind of chaos that could expose weakness faster than a bullet. She spoke for the first time, voice low, calm. Simulation parameters uploaded, system calibration complete. No wasted tone, no defensive posture, just function. Evans smirked. "You can run the targets, ma'am. Should be simple enough for you to handle. Try not to trip over any cables." The cadets laughed again, reflexively, nervously. But Colonel Davies saw something change, a small flicker behind her calm exterior. It wasn't anger, it was calculation. She slipped a cooling sleeve over the left prosthetic actuator. The gesture was mechanical, almost mundane, but the faint whir of the carbon fiber servos filled the air with an alien hum. To those who didn't understand, it looked clinical, fragile, but Davies understood. That sound wasn't weakness, it was readiness. She flexed her toes, the metal plates shifting with the soft click of precision machinery. Her awareness seemed to stretch beyond the room itself, as if she could feel the power conduits vibrating beneath the floor. He'd seen soldiers with thousand-yard stares, but this was something else. Evans didn't notice. He was too busy performing for the cadets, his last act before the lesson began. "Remember," he barked, packing before the massive one-way window overlooking the simulation arena below. "Combat is about muscle, endurance, blood, and grit. You don't win wars with keyboards and theory, you win them by moving faster and hitting harder than your enemy." He turned, grinning at Anna. "Wouldn't you agree, ma'am?" She didn't answer, didn't look at him. Her attention was on the console, on the digital battlefield about to unfold. The silence was louder than any insult. And something about that silence, that absolute lack of reaction, began to disturb even the cadets. Because silence can mean many things: weakness, defeat, fear, but sometimes it means control. A soft chime broke the tension. The crucible was online. Anna's voice, calm and professional, filled the comms. "Alpha Squad ready up. Mission parameters uploaded, hostage rescue. High-value target 3rd floor east wing, standard row." Evans grinned, clapping his hands together. "All right, let's make this clean, show her how it's done." The squad, 6 of the Academy's best, moved with synchronized precision into the elevator bay. Below, through the glass, the modular cityscape shimmered to life. Neon lights, smoke simulation, flickering street lamps. It was designed to look like a war zone, clean, controlled chaos. Anna's hands hovered over the holographic interface. She wasn't reacting to their movements. She was already 3 steps ahead. "OPFOR control engaged," she whispered. The lights around her dimmed slightly, leaving her face half-lit in blue glow. Evans folded his arms, smirking. "This'll be over in 10 minutes. Maybe she'll learn something." Davies didn't speak, he just watched. The simulation began. Breach clear flow. The cadets moved like professionals, bursting through the entry point with tactical precision. The walls flashed as simulated rounds shredded drywall. Within seconds, they had a foothold. Evans's grin widened. "Perfect dynamic entry," he said, his voice swelling with pride. "Overwhelming force, maximum aggression, that's how you win." But Anna wasn't watching the entry. Her gaze was fixed on the data streams running across her console. Biometric readings, audio feedback, comms frequency stability. She wasn't observing, she was listening to everything. 30 seconds in, it happened. The squad's communications went dead. Miller, the lead cadet, tapped his headset. Comms down, switching to backup frequency. Nothing, only static. Evans frowned, probably a glitch. But Davies knew better. His eyes narrowed. Anna's fingers moved slightly. Just one small input command, so subtle you might miss it. Suddenly, faint sounds filled the squad's earpieces. A woman crying. A rifle scraping against tile above them. The squad froze. Training told them to respond, to clear every sound, every unknown. 2 of them peeled off, sweeping a nearby hallway toward the sound. "Empty." Evans leaned toward the glass. "What the hell are they doing? They're splitting formation." Davies stayed silent. Anna adjusted another parameter. The lights flickered, then died. The crucible plunged into total darkness. Green lenses flared as the cadets switched to night vision, but Anna had anticipated it. Infrared strobes detonated across the corridor, calibrated precisely to their goggles. The world became blinding chaos. Evans cursed, "They're blind." The cadets shouted over one another, disoriented, panicked. The precision they drilled for months dissolved into confusion. Davies exhaled slowly. "She's not fighting them," he murmured. "She's teaching them." Evans looked over. "Teaching them what?" "That the battlefield doesn't care about your muscles." Below, Alpha Squad stumbled through the flickering dark, each step amplifying their mistakes. The sound of boots echoed off hollow walls, but Anna was already 3 moves ahead. She engaged the fire suppression system on the floor above. The low thud of water pressure echoed like heavy footsteps. Then came the whisper of enemy chatter in a foreign tongue, directional audio projected through the walls. To the cadets, trapped, blind, and terrified, it felt real. Heart rate spiked, breathing accelerated, panic set in. Evans's jaw clenched. That's enough, end simulation. Davies raised a hand. Not yet. Anna didn't look up. She was orchestrating something, a perfect, quiet symphony of psychological warfare. And then, with surgical timing, she sealed their escape route. The breech door slammed shut with a metallic echo. The squad was trapped. Evans slammed his palm on the glass. She's killing them in there. No, Davies whispered. She's showing them what real war feels like. From every window, red icons appeared, enemy combatants rappelling in from the outside, breaching through glass and steel. 6 against an invisible army. The cadets fired blindly. Soft thuds marked simulated fatal hits. One by one, their icons turned red. 4 minutes, 17 seconds. Complete squad wipe. Silence. The observation deck felt colder suddenly. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Evans's face was pale, disbelief carving lines into his pride. No way, that's not possible. The systems glitched. Anna finally turned her head, calm, controlled. Her gaze met his, steady and utterly void of triumph. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Because in that silence was a truth louder than any victory cheer. She hadn't needed legs to win. She hadn't even needed to stand. The cadets looked at her differently now. Their nervous laughter was gone, replaced by something else. Awe, shame, respect. Colonel Davies remained still, the faintest ghost of a knowing smile at the corner of his lips. He'd seen this before, that moment when arrogance met reality and learned to kneel. Anna turned back to her console, already running diagnostics, already moving forward. The others were still processing what had just happened. Evans swallowed hard, his confidence fractured. "What the hell did you just do?" he asked quietly. Her reply was the same as her method, soft, precise, deliberate. Nothing they didn't teach themselves. And that was the moment the myth began. Because strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Why didn't she even look at the screen? The room had gone completely silent after the simulation ended, but Anna Sharma, she was still typing. Calm, focused, her face bathed in the blue-white light of her console. To her, the test wasn't over. It had only begun. Across from her, Sergeant Evans stood frozen, jaw tight, eyes flicking between the tactical display and her motionless profile. The scoreboard still glowed in harsh, digital clarity. Alpha Squad 0 kills, OPFOR 6 kills, duration 4 minutes 17 seconds. It wasn't just failure, it was a massacre. He opened his mouth, maybe to protest, maybe to make another joke, but nothing came out. The words had finally abandoned him. The cadets stood like statues, their minds still processing the impossibility of what they'd just witnessed. They trained under Evans for months. Every drill, every briefing, every shouting match had taught them one thing, that strength was dominance and dominance was loud. But the woman who had dismantled them never raised her voice. Colonel Davies stepped out from the shadows, his boots echoing softly against the concrete. Every step felt deliberate, like a metronome ticking through their shame. He stopped beside her console, his expression unreadable. "Instructor Sharma," he said quietly. She looked up. "Colonel, bring up your performance log." Her fingers glided over the console. With a few strokes, the main screen shifted. The replay began to unfold, streams of data and neural metrics cascading across the wall-sized display. The cadets flinched as they saw themselves moving, reacting, failing, like watching ghosts of their own panic. Davy studied the lines of code, the subroutines she'd written mid-simulation. Her attack hadn't been brute force. It had been precision, psychological architecture built in real time. She had used their training as the weapon, their predictability, their faith in pattern. Evans found his voice again, brittle and defensive. "You rigged the system," he said, pointing a trembling hand toward the console. "There's no way those effects came from a standard AI module. You." Davies cut him off with a single raised hand. "She didn't use an AI, Sergeant." Evans blinked. "Then what?" "She was the opposing force." The realization sank in like ice water. The cadets looked from the colonel to the woman at the console. She had fought them alone, controlling every light, every sound, every psychological cue from behind a keyboard. 1 against 6. And she hadn't even stood up. Evans's voice cracked. "That's impossible." Davies' eyes didn't leave the screen. "No, Sergeant, that's mastery." The colonel turned toward her. "Instructor, file verification code, Delta Voner." The screen flickered, the Crucible's tactical overlay vanishing into a black background. Then, in stark white letters, appeared a header. Personnel record Sharma, Anna. Clearance level restricted. Evans frowned. "What's this?" "Information," Davies said, his tone even. "That should have been known before anyone opened their mouth." He entered an override command. The redacted bars began to dissolve, line by line. The cadets leaned forward. Evans took a half step back. The first words that appeared were her former unit. "Joint Special Operations Command, Task Force 11. The silence deepened. Even the hum of the simulation chamber seemed to fade. For a long moment, no one spoke. Every soldier in that room knew the name, whispered rumors, unconfirmed missions, operations that never made it into history books. Task Force 11 wasn't a unit. It was a myth. Evans's lips parted, but no sound came out. Then came the second line, codename Nix. The cadets exchanged wide-eyed glances. They'd heard the legend. Everyone had. A phantom operator who had pulled off impossible extractions, who had taken out entire insurgent networks without leaving a trace. Some said Nix wasn't real. Some said she was a myth soldiers told to make courage sound human again. Now she was standing right in front of them. And she hadn't said a single word. The data kept scrolling. Awards, commendations. Silver Star with 3 oak leaf clusters. Bronze Star for Valor, Distinguished Service Cross, Purple Heart with 4. Then came a line that made Evans's breath hitch, a mission title. He knew it. Operation Spartan Hammer. He stepped closer to the screen, squinting at the half-redacted paragraph beneath it. Sustained catastrophic injuries while single-handedly holding a defensive position against overwhelming enemy forces. Actions directly responsible for successful extraction of SEAL Team 3. Evans's mouth went dry. His old unit, his brothers. He told their story for years, the legendary extraction under impossible fire, the guardian angel no one ever identified. He'd built his entire reputation around that myth. He looked at Anna, realization crashing down on him like shrapnel. It was her. She was the reason any of them had come home. Evans staggered back, the color draining from his face. Colonel Davies didn't look at him. He simply said, "That woman you mocked, Sergeant, is the reason half your unit ever saw another sunrise." No one breathed. Anna rose slowly from her chair, the hydraulic servos in her prosthetics hissing softly, not like machines, but like the quiet exhale of discipline itself. She stood at attention. Davies turned toward her. "Ma'am," he said, voice steady, formal. Then, in front of every cadet, in front of the sergeant who'd mocked her, he brought his hand to his brow and delivered a crisp, perfect salute. It wasn't ceremonial, it was reverent. "My sincere apologies for my staff's lack of professionalism," he said. "It won't happen again." Anna returned the salute with quiet precision. "No apology necessary, sir." Davies nodded once, then turned toward the stunned room. "Cadets, take note. You've just seen the difference between noise and mastery, between arrogance and art." He looked at Evans. "Dismissed, Sergeant." Evans didn't move. His eyes were glassy, hands trembling slightly at his sides. Then, without a word, he walked out. The door's hiss felt like judgment closing behind him. For a long while, no one spoke. The cadets remained frozen, their perception of strength, of authority, rewritten in an instant. Anna sat back down, pulling up the data logs again. "Simulation results archived," she said softly. "Recommend revision to doctrine, cognitive dominance over physical aggression." The colonel gave a faint smile. "Approved." As he walked out, the cadet's eyes followed her. The myth of Nix wasn't a story anymore. It had weight, flesh, and the faint hum of carbon fiber beneath combat fatigues. Later that night, the story spread like wildfire. By midnight, the barracks were buzzing. By morning, the entire academy knew. The woman with no legs had broken the best squad in under 5 minutes. They started calling the simulation something new, Sharma's gauntlet. No one wanted to face it, and everyone wanted to. But while others talked, Anna worked. She stayed late into the night, reviewing training footage, refining algorithms, studying cadet biometrics for signs of cognitive collapse. For her, it wasn't about proving a point. It was about making them better, smarter than she'd ever been allowed to be. She knew what war did to arrogance. It broke it. And she wanted these cadets to break early here, safely, before the battlefield did it for them. In the quiet of the observation deck, long after the lights had dimmed, Anna stood alone. Through the glass, the crucible floor lay dark and empty. She stared at it the way some people stare at graves. Her reflection stared back, half flesh, half forged metal. The pain was gone, but memory wasn't. She remembered the night she'd lost her legs. The screaming, the heat, the impossible weight of holding a line when everyone else had already fallen. She made peace with that pain a long time ago. But sometimes, in the silence between breaths, she could still feel it, the ghost ache, not in her body but in her pride. War had taken her limbs, but it had also stripped away everything unnecessary: fear, vanity, ego. What remained was pure focus. The door behind her opened softly. Footsteps, hesitant, heavy. She didn't turn. "Ma'am." It was Evans. His voice was quieter now. The volume gone, the bravado burned away. He stood a few feet behind her, hands clasped in front of him. "I checked the logs from Operation Spartan Hammer," he said. "2 of the men you saved, I knew them." Silence. "They told me about an angel on Overwatch. Never missed. They said whoever it was never spoke." Anna's reflection didn't blink. Evans's voice broke. "It was you." She turned slowly, her eyes steady, unreadable. He nodded once, a painful admission. "I was wrong about you." She studied him for a moment. "You were wrong about a lot of people, Sergeant." He took the hit, didn't flinch. "Permission to attend your next debrief, ma'am," he said quietly. "I need to understand what you did to my squad. I need to learn it." For the first time that night, her gaze softened. "Permission granted," she said. He nodded, swallowed hard, and left. The door closed. Anna looked back at the darkened crucible below, the empty cityscape waiting in silence. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was barely more than a whisper. "You never stop fighting, you just change the battlefield." The lights from the city outside reflected faintly against the glass, ghosting her silhouette, a woman remade, no longer bound by what she'd lost, but defined by what she'd become. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the academy, a new lesson was already forming, one that couldn't be taught by shouting. Because sometimes, the most powerful victories are the ones that arrive without sound. Why was he there again, sitting in the front row, silent, pen in hand, eyes fixed on her. Sergeant Evans hadn't missed a single debrief since that day. The man who once filled rooms with noise now filled notebooks with questions. Every morning, he arrived before the cadets, waiting in the corner like a man haunted by something he couldn't undo. And Anna Sharma led him. She never mentioned his apology again, never brought up the humiliation, never used her power to punish. She didn't need to. Some lessons carved themselves so deeply into a man that words only dull the edge. The debrief began in the quiet hum of the crucible control room. The cadets, all fresh recruits for the next trial, sat in perfect posture, their faces tight with anticipation. Across the glass wall below, the modular city was reconfiguring itself into a new combat maze. The floor plates shifted, walls rotated, and entire blocks transformed into unfamiliar terrain. Anna stood by the console, watching. Her voice, when it came, was low, steady. Combat doesn't reward confidence, it rewards control. She glanced at the cadets. You will lose your plan, you will lose communication, you will lose the illusion that you're prepared. What matters then is what you do when the noise dies. Her words were slow, deliberate, not motivational, but surgical. They didn't inspire applause, they inspired reflection. One cadet raised her hand, a young woman with a sharp jawline and uncertainty in her eyes. "Ma'am," she said, "how do we stay calm when everything goes wrong?" Anna looked at her for a long time, then answered softly, "By realizing it already has." The room fell silent. Evans's pen stopped moving. He was watching her now, not like an instructor evaluating a peer, but like a student trying to decode the movements of a master. Anna turned back to the simulation controls, her prosthetic joints hissing faintly as she adjusted her stance. "Alpha Squad 2, she said, "prepare for deployment." The cadets nodded, nervous energy filling the air. But this time there was something different, an undercurrent of humility. They'd heard the story. Everyone had. Sharma's gauntlet, they called it now. The impossible test that broke men louder and stronger than them. As the squad disappeared into the elevator bay below, Evans leaned forward, elbows on his knees, whispering mostly to himself. "They'll go in hard. They'll go in blind." Anna didn't respond. She keyed in a sequence, subtle adjustments to atmospheric variables, temperature fluctuations, acoustic distortions. The Crucible's intelligence system adapted instantly. The simulation came alive. Through the observation glass, the squad moved like ghosts into the darkness of the replica compound. And just like before, everything started perfectly. Evans muttered the rhythm under his breath. Stack, breach, clear. But then Anna changed the game. The first detonation was a soft pulse electromagnetic. It fried their tactical visors. Their augmented readouts went black. No lights, no guidance, just heartbeat and darkness. The cadets stumbled. One cursed under his breath. Another whispered for orders. Evans didn't speak. He recognized the move. She'd used a variant of that tactic during Operation Spartan Hammer. Back then, it had bought her 7 minutes of survival against an entire enemy platoon. She hadn't forgotten, she refined it. The simulation unfolded like a dance choreographed by fear itself. Anna guided the environment as if it were alive, subtle vibrations through the floor, directional echoes, shifting heat signatures. She was teaching them to feel the unseen. After 6 minutes, the last cadet was neutralized. Evans exhaled, slow and heavy. "You don't beat her," he said quietly, almost to the room itself. "You survive her." Anna shut down the simulation. The lights brightened gradually, revealing the disoriented cadets pulling off their helmets, faces flushed, breathing hard. No one spoke. She looked at them from the control deck. "You lasted 6 minutes, she said. "That's progress." One of the cadets frowned. "Progress, we still failed." Anna tilted her head slightly. "Failure is data. Data is progress. The ones who stop after they fail never deserve to pass. Her tone wasn't comforting. It was true. And truth, when spoken by someone who's lived it, doesn't need soft edges. Evans scribbled something down, then paused. "Ma'am," he said, "with your permission, may I?" Anna looked at him. "Go ahead." He stood, stepping toward the edge of the observation deck, addressing the cadets below. His voice wasn't loud anymore. It carried weight, not volume. "She's not showing you how to fight," he said. "She's showing you how to think." The cadets turned, surprised. The same man who used to mock her was now standing in defense of her method. Evans continued, his tone steady. "I used to believe combat was muscle memory. Push harder, run faster, yell louder. That's not combat, that's noise. What you just saw," he gestured toward Anna, "that's what survival looks like when the noise dies." Then he sat back down, quiet, deliberate, and strangely peaceful. Anna gave him the faintest nod, an unspoken acknowledgement between two soldiers who finally understood the same language. Weeks passed, and something started to shift inside the academy. It began small, cadets lingering longer after debriefs, asking questions not about shooting drills but about thought, about perception, about silence. They began running their own simulations differently, shutting off their comms mid-run, blinding themselves intentionally, forcing their senses to adapt. The culture was changing. Evans changed with it. He rewrote his drills. Cadets who used to do push-ups for mistakes now ran blindfolded obstacle courses. They learned to track sounds, to navigate by instinct. They learned what it meant to be uncomfortable and to stay calm inside that discomfort. He started quoting Anna, not himself. And every time he did, the cadets listened. Because they saw something in him now, humility, and that made them believe in her even more. Anna, for her part, remained detached from the myth forming around her. The nickname Nyx had resurfaced, whispered in corridors, scribbled on training boards. Some cadets started wearing small black patches, no insignia, just the symbol of a crescent moon, as a sign of quiet respect. She said nothing about it, but sometimes when she passed them, there was the faintest flicker in her expression, something between pride and sorrow. One evening, after another long day of simulations, Evans found her alone again, in the academy library, surrounded by books so old the pages had begun to yellow. He hesitated at the doorway, then stepped inside. "You read these?" he asked. Anna didn't look up. "I study them." "Why, they're ancient, pre-digital tactics, half of it's obsolete." She turned a page slowly. "So are people who think history has nothing to teach them." Evans chuckled softly, the first real laugh she'd ever heard from him that didn't sound defensive. "Fair point." He pulled up a chair. "I've been reworking the breaching course. I want your input." She closed the book, eyes meeting his. "Why?" "Because I don't want them to be like I was," he said quietly. Loud, blind, certain. There was no shame in his tone anymore, just honesty. Anna nodded. "Then teach them to listen before they lead." He frowned slightly. "Listen to who?" "To themselves," she said. That sentence stayed with him. Days turned to weeks. The academy began to feel different. The drills ran quieter. The hallways echoed with thought instead of arrogance. Colonel Davies noticed. "You've changed the air in this place," he told her one morning during a strategy review. "It's not something I can put in a report, but it's real." Anna looked at the window overlooking the crucible. "Change doesn't start with orders, Colonel. It starts with silence. You give people space to hear themselves, and they'll find their own discipline." Davies nodded, studying her. "You remind me of someone I once served with." "Who?" He smiled faintly. "Someone who stopped talking long enough to become impossible to ignore." The next crucible trial was different. For the first time, Anna and Evans co-ran the simulation. The cadets called it the impossible test. This time no one mocked her, no one doubted her. They entered that simulation not with swagger but with respect. When it was over 7 minutes and 23 seconds later, the squad had lasted longer than any before them. Still defeated, but better, sharper. Anna watched them exit, exhausted but smiling through the sweat. One of them, the same young woman who'd asked about fear, saluted her. "Ma'am," she said, "I think I get it now." Anna tilted her head. "Get what?" The cadet smiled faintly. "You don't win by fighting harder. You win by staying calm enough to see the fight." Anna returned the salute. "Then you're already better than I was." That night, after the lights went out and the crucible fell quiet, Evans walked the empty simulation floor. His footsteps echoed softly across the metal. He stopped where his cadets had fallen earlier, right beneath the faint, flickering lights. He stood there for a long time, staring at nothing. Then he whispered, "You were right, Nix." He didn't know she was standing in the observation deck above, watching him through the glass. She heard him, but she didn't respond. She simply placed her hand against the cool surface, her reflection hovering in the darkened glass beside his silhouette. In that silent exchange, something like forgiveness passed between them, wordless, unseen but real. Outside, dawn was beginning to break over the academy, a gray light spilling across the training fields, touching the crucible with a soft shimmer. A new generation of cadets would arrive soon, fresh faces, fresh arrogance, fresh lessons waiting to be learned. Anna knew what was coming. History always repeated itself. Pride would always need humbling, and somewhere in that process, another story like hers would be born. She took a slow breath, steady and quiet. The servos in her legs hummed faintly as she turned away from the glass. In the end, she thought, wars don't really end. They just move indoors, into minds, into memories. And that's where the real battles are fought. Because strength doesn't mean never falling. It means standing again, even when standing requires steel. Why did the young cadet keep waiting after everyone else left? It was past midnight. The crucible's lights had dimmed to standby mode, bathing the massive chamber in a ghostly blue haze. The scent of gun oil and sweat still hung in the air. Most nights after training ended, Anna stayed behind reviewing telemetry, nodding neural response curves, recalibrating simulation variables. She preferred the silence. But tonight, there was someone else in the room. The same young woman who had asked about fear, Cadet Vega. She stood at the bottom of the observation deck, helmet tucked under one arm, her expression torn between exhaustion and something deeper. Anna didn't look up. "It's late," she said, eyes on her console. "I know, ma'am. You should rest." "I can't," Vega said softly. "I keep replaying it in my head. I keep missing the signals. I move too fast. I don't think I react." Anna finally turned her gaze toward her, slow, assessing. The cadet's uniform was soaked through, her hands trembling faintly from fatigue. But her eyes, they burned, not with arrogance but with hunger. Anna powered down the console. "Follow me." They walked across the silent observation deck and into the crucible floor below, a cavernous labyrinth of simulated buildings and digital ghosts. The air was cool, sterile, humming faintly with electricity. Anna stopped in the center of the arena. "You want to understand why you failed?" Vega nodded. "Then put the helmet back on." The cadet hesitated but obeyed. The visor sealed with a hiss, the world around her flickering into augmented focus. But there was no mission file, no objectives, only silence and an empty cityscape. Anna's voice came through her headset, calm and disembodied. "Close your eyes." Vega hesitated. "Ma'am." "Close them." She obeyed. "What do you hear?" Vega strained. "Nothing." "Wrong, listen again." There it was, faint, almost imperceptible. The hum of the power conduits beneath the floor. The soft, rhythmic pulse of her own heartbeat amplified through the helmet's mic. The subtle creak of cooling metal from a nearby wall panel. Anna's voice was steady. Sound tells you the truth sight hides. A soldier who depends on sight is blind. Vega turned her head slightly, focusing on the tiny variations in pitch, distance, vibration. The soundscape of the crucible began to unfold around her like a living map. Anna continued, her tone softer now. Combat isn't chaos. It only feels that way when you can't hear its rhythm. Every battlefield has one, the hum beneath the noise. For several minutes, Vega stood there, eyes closed, breathing slow, learning to hear. When she finally opened her eyes, Anna was standing only a few meters away. "Better," she said. Vega exhaled, trembling. "How do you know all this?" Anna's gaze drifted upward, toward the massive ceiling where the simulated skyline hung frozen in darkness. "Because I stopped relying on what I could see long before you were born." Vega frowned slightly, then realized what she meant and looked down, almost ashamed. Anna didn't move. "You think I lost something," she said quietly. "But I didn't. I gained a new way of understanding the world. The body changes, the mission doesn't." The cadet swallowed hard. "Ma'am, do you ever miss it?" Anna didn't answer right away. Her eyes softened, her voice dropping to something almost human. "Every day," she said, "but regret is a luxury I can't afford." She turned away, motioning for Vega to follow. "Come on, I'll show you something." They walked toward the far wall, where a small door led into a side control bay, an old maintenance room that had long been converted into storage. Dust coated everything. Anna pulled open a heavy locker. Inside, neatly arranged, was a set of old, battle-scarred equipment: a sniper rifle with a worn serial plate, a tattered field manual, and a single folded flag in a case. She lifted the rifle, the metal gleaming under the flickering light. "M210 enhanced, 17 pounds. The balance is perfect if you breathe with it." Vega's eyes widened. "That's—" "Yes," Anna said simply, "the one from Spartan Hammer." The cadet reached out but stopped short. "May I?" Anna nodded. The weapon felt heavier than Vega expected, not just in weight, but in history. Scratches along the stock told a story of violence and endurance. Anna watched her cradle it. "That rifle didn't save me. It just gave me something to hold onto while I decided to live." Vega looked up, unsure how to respond. "Sit," Anna said, gesturing to a crate. "You want to learn, then learn." For the next hour she spoke, not like an instructor, but like someone reliving fragments of memory. She described how wind moved differently over burning sand, how sound travels slower when death feels close. She taught Vega how to measure distance by the rhythm of her pulse, how silence itself can be used to force an opponent's mistake. It wasn't tactics, it was philosophy. At some point, Vega realized Anna wasn't teaching her to win. She was teaching her how to understand what winning costs. When they finally stepped back into the main deck, the first light of dawn was beginning to bleed through the skylights. "Ma'am," Vega said softly, "why are you teaching me this?" Anna's voice was almost a whisper. "Because one day, someone will underestimate you too." The cadet froze, the meaning hitting deeper than she expected. "And when they do," Anna added, "don't waste time proving them wrong, just win." Days turned into weeks. Word spread about Anna's late-night sessions. More cadets began asking for extra instruction, not in combat technique, but in the strange, quiet art she taught: perception, patience, control. Evans began assisting, adapting her lessons into drills. Sharma's gauntlet became more than a test, it became a culture, a way of thinking. Cadets no longer shouted during drills. They moved in silence, communicating with glances and breath. The loudest sound in the crucible was often the hum of machinery, or the soft voice of Anna correcting a stance, a rhythm, a thought. Colonel Davies noticed. The academy had shifted. It was calmer, quieter, but sharper. Every graduate that passed through her program carried something of her presence, that measured patience, that terrifying calm under pressure. The command board called it the Sharma effect. Anna ignored the term. She didn't care about legacy. Legacy was noise. What mattered were moments like this, watching Vega lead a squad through a live sim. The young woman had changed. She moved differently now. Her breathing was steady, her commands measured. They lost the mission, but lasted 10 minutes. After the debrief, Vega approached Anna, removing her helmet. Her hair was damp, face streaked with sweat, but her eyes held something new. 10 minutes, she said, smiling faintly. Anna nodded. Progress. Vega hesitated, then asked, "Ma'am, what if someone can't be as calm as you? What if fear wins?" Anna looked at her. "Then make fear useful. It sharpens you. It keeps you alive. Just don't let it speak louder than you." Vega exhaled, the words sinking deep. Understood. Good, Anna said softly. Then you're ready for the next lesson. Vega blinked. There's another one. There's always another one. That evening, as the facility emptied, Evans lingered behind with Anna. "You see her?" he asked, nodding toward Vega's departing silhouette. "Reminds me of someone I used to know." Anna raised an eyebrow. "Who?" He smiled faintly. "You, before you stopped needing to prove anything." She looked out across the empty simulation floor. "If she's lucky, she'll learn faster than I did." Evans leaned against the console. "You think she will?" "She already has." They stood in silence for a moment, two soldiers bound not by rank or duty, but by the shared understanding of what it means to rebuild yourself from the ruins of who you were. Evans finally said, "You know, the cadets talk about you like you're not real." Anna smirked faintly. "Good. It's easier to learn from a myth than from a person." He nodded. "Yeah, but they also talk about her Vega. They call her Little Nix." Anna's expression softened, surprise flickering across her usually unreadable face. "Don't let her hear that." "Why?" "Because she needs to become herself, not my shadow." Evans nodded slowly. "Then you're doing your job right." Late that night, Anna walked the silent corridors of the academy alone. The hum of distant machinery followed her, constant, grounding. She paused at a display case near the main hall, one that held relics from the academy's history. Medals, fragments of uniforms, mission flags. There among them, someone had placed something new, a small, unmarked sheet of paper pinned beneath glass. Sharma's gauntlet record, 4 minutes 17 seconds. OPFOR, 6 kills. Alpha Squad, 0. No name, no explanation. Just numbers. A reminder. Anna stared at it for a long time. Then she reached out, fingertips brushing the glass. It wasn't pride she felt. It was responsibility. The quiet kind that never leaves you, the kind that grows heavier the more people believe in you. Behind her reflection in the glass, she could almost see them. The cadets she'd trained, the soldiers she'd saved, the ghosts she'd lost. And in that reflection, she whispered to herself, "They'll never understand what this really costs." Then she turned, the sound of her carbon fiber steps echoing softly through the corridor. Outside, the wind carried faint traces of dawn. And somewhere deep within the academy's steel heart, a generation of soldiers slept, their dreams shaped by the lessons of a woman who had lost her legs, but not her fire. Because the greatest teachers aren't the ones who tell you how to fight. They're the ones who show you how to listen to the silence between battles. And sometimes, that silence is where courage is born. Why were the alarms blaring at 400 hours? The academy had never heard that sound before, a low, rolling siren that seemed to crawl through concrete and bone. Cadets poured into the corridors half-dressed, adrenaline rising faster than thought. The crucible's doors were sealed, its lights red. Somewhere in the command wing, a voice echoed over the intercom. "Security breach, outer perimeter compromised. This is not a drill." Instructors sprinted past stunned students. Evans appeared from the shadows, already geared up, sidearm holstered, jaw set. His eyes scanned the hall, sharp, calculating. Then he saw her. Anna Sharma, already standing by the main terminal, hair tied back, black fatigue spotless. Her prosthetic limbs whirred softly as she moved with measured precision. "Report," she said. "Unknown drone swarm," Evans replied. "Autonomous, low altitude. Defensive systems didn't tag them until they were inside 20 clicks. Origin? Unclear. Could be rogue test units, could be more." Anna's eyes flicked to the red map on the hollow screen, blinking dots converging toward the south perimeter. "How long until contact?" 5 minutes. Then we're already late." Evans hesitated. "You think it's an attack?" Her voice was steady. "No, I think it's a test someone forgot to schedule." Davies entered then, uniform unbuttoned, face pale but composed. "We just received word from command," he said. "It's not a simulation. The drones belong to an external contractor running unsanctioned wargame protocols. The system went rogue when their control server glitched." "How many?" 48 confirmed, full strike capability." Evans muttered a curse. "Our interceptors." "Offline. EMP sweep from the swarm took them out before we knew it." Anna's gaze sharpened. "So the only defense left is us." Davies nodded grimly. She turned to him. "Then authorize activation of the Crucible's live-fire mode." The colonel hesitated. "That facility, designed for simulation." "It's a fortress underneath the theatrics," Anna said, voice cutting through his doubt. "Steel walls, automated turrets, modular defense grid. If we reroute power from the dorm sectors, we can hard seal the academy and contain whatever hits." Evans looked at her. "You can run that from the console." She nodded once. "I built half the code." Davies didn't argue further. "Do it." The Crucible roared to life. Steel shutters slid down over glass. Interior lights dimmed to amber. The hum of generators filled the air like the growl of an awakening beast. Cadets rushed into formation. Most had never even handled live rounds outside controlled drills. Fear flickered behind their eyes. Anna moved among them, quiet, composed, unshakable. Her presence alone steadied hands. "Listen to me," she said, her voice carrying without shouting. "This isn't training anymore, but the principles are the same. Control, awareness, silence. You panic, you die." One cadet, Vega, stepped forward. "Ma'am, permission to deploy with Alpha Team." Anna hesitated for a heartbeat. "You're not ready." "Neither is anyone else." There was no defiance in her tone, just truth. Anna stared at her for a moment, then gave a single nod. "Then you lead them." Vega's eyes widened. "Ma'am, you've trained for this, you know my system. You listen and they'll live." The young woman swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." Evans watched the exchange with something like pride. "You just promoted your shadow," he said quietly. Anna's gaze didn't move from Vega's retreating form. "No, I just gave her a mirror." Outside, the first explosion sounded like thunder rolling through the valley. The swarm was here. Dozens of black specks moved across the pre-dawn horizon, their engines glowing faint orange. Davies turned to Anna. "What do you need?" "Access to the defense grid, and a clear line to the Crucible's reactor feed." "Granted." She moved fast, fingers flying over the holographic console. The entire campus lit up on the display, hundreds of micronodes representing the facility's systems. She linked, rerouted, and fused them into a single responsive network. Evans leaned over her shoulder. "You're building a hive to fight a hive." Her tone was dry. "I learned from the best mistakes." Moments later, the first drone broke the perimeter. Turrets roared to life. The blast shook the walls. Vega's voice crackled through comms. "Contact South Corridor Level 3, engaging." Evans grabbed a rifle from the rack. "I'm going down there." Anna didn't stop him. "Keep her alive." He nodded once and sprinted toward the elevator. Down below, Vega and her squad moved through the smoke-filled corridors, the air thick with ozone and heat. The sound of rotors echoed like wasps in a jar. "Targets closing," one cadet shouted. "Hold positions," Vega commanded. Her voice was firm but calm. "Remember what she taught you. Noise is weakness. Listen." Through the chaos, they caught the faint hum of approaching drones, distinct frequencies, each slightly different. Vega counted them by sound. "Four left flank, two overhead," she whispered. "Now." They opened fire, short, precise bursts. Two drones exploded instantly. Another slammed into a wall and disintegrated. The squad shifted, fluid, adaptive. Evans burst through the smoke behind them, rifle in hand. "Not bad, kid." "Still four left," she replied. "Let's make it zero." They moved as one, teacher, student, soldiers. Every motion echoed the lessons born in silence months before. When the last drone fell, the hallway went still except for the crackle of burning circuitry. Evans tapped his comm. "South corridor secure." Above, Anna exhaled slowly. One battle won, too many left. The next wave came faster. 50 new signals on the board. Anna rerouted power, shifting defense nodes in real time. Her hands blurred across the interface, mechanical fingers of light tracing paths through chaos. Davies watched her work. "How do you even think that fast?" She didn't answer. The whine of servos under her fatigues deepened as she shifted her weight, almost melding into the machine she commanded. The crucible trembled again. A drone smashed into the outer wall, detonating on impact. Sparks lit the control room. Anna kept typing. "They're targeting heat signatures. Cut power to dorm sectors." "That'll black out half the base." "Exactly." Within seconds, half the academy went dark. The drones, blind to cold surfaces, redirected toward the active grid, straight into her trap. "Now," she whispered. Automated turrets unfolded from the courtyard walls and opened fire. The swarm imploded in a storm of tracer rounds and smoke. For a moment, silence. Then applause, spontaneous, disbelieving from the cadets watching the feed. Anna ignored it. Her eyes stayed on the screen. "It's not over." She was right. The feed flickered, a secondary wave emerging beyond the valley, larger, denser. Evans's voice came through comms, ragged but alive. "We've got another swarm, bigger." Davies cursed under his breath. "We don't have ammo for this." Anna's hands froze mid-command. Then she said quietly, "We don't need ammo." She began typing again, opening a secondary console, one Davies didn't recognize. "What are you doing?" "Overriding the Crucible's power limiters." "Sharma, that grid isn't designed for." "Neither am I," she cut him off. The entire facility vibrated as she executed the override. Power conduits blazed with blue light, feeding energy back into the simulation emitters. She looked to Davies. "Tell your people to stand clear of the yard." He hesitated. "What are you?" "Just trust me." The colonel relayed the order. Outside, cadets scattered to cover. The drones descended, an avalanche of motion, metal wings cutting through the smoke. Anna watched them approach. Her eyes were steady, her hands calm. Then she triggered the command. The Crucible's emitters pulsed once, and the world erupted in light. A dome of electromagnetic discharge expanded outward from the facility, invisible to the naked eye but lethal to every circuit it touched. One by one, the drones died midair, engines seizing, rotors halting, metal raining down like black hail. The sky went quiet. Davies stared, awe in his voice. "You just turned the entire academy into an EMP cannon." Anna exhaled, correction into a lesson. She stepped back from the console, her prosthetics hissing softly. Below, Vega and Evans emerged from the smoke, faces illuminated by the faint dawn breaking through the shattered clouds. Evans looked up at the observation deck. That was something. Vega raised her hand to her headset. "Ma'am, targets neutralized. Academy secure." Anna's reply came after a pause. "Good work, Lieutenant." Vega blinked. "Lieutenant." "Effective immediately," Davies said into the comm, smiling faintly. "Consider it field promotion." Hours later, the academy was quiet again. The smoke cleared. The sun rose, painting the wreckage in soft gold. Evans limped slightly as he climbed the stairs back to the command deck. His uniform was scorched, his hands black with soot. Anna stood by the shattered window, watching the horizon. He stopped beside her. "You saved them." She didn't look away. "They saved themselves. I just reminded them they could." He nodded, letting the silence fill the space between them. "You realize this changes everything," he said after a moment. "Command's going to rewrite every protocol after this." "Good," she said quietly. "Maybe they'll stop teaching war like it's choreography." He smiled faintly. "You really think they'll listen?" She turned her head slightly, the faintest glint in her eyes. "They'll listen to the results." Below, cadets moved among the debris, retrieving fallen drones, helping one another. Vega stood at the center, directing cleanup, her calm unmistakable. Evans followed Anna's gaze. "She's becoming you." Anna shook her head. "No, she's becoming better." That night when the academy finally slept, Anna stayed behind again. The hum of damaged circuits filled the dark. She sat alone by the console, staring at the blank screen. Her reflection looked back, weary, scarred, but alive. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to close her eyes. The past came in fragments, fire, smoke, the moment she'd realized she'd never walk again. The hands pulling her from rubble, the sound of a helicopter fading into night, the feeling of helplessness. She opened her eyes slowly, grounding herself in the present, the hum of machinery, the faint ache in her prosthetics, the quiet peace of survival. War had taken pieces of her, but tonight, she had given something back, not revenge, not proof, but purpose. Outside, the night wind carried the scent of burned metal and new beginnings. And as she sat there, alone in the half-light of the crucible, Anna Sharma finally allowed herself to breathe deeply, quietly, completely. Because sometimes victory doesn't roar. Sometimes it just exhales. Why did command arrive 3 days later instead of 1? It wasn't hesitation, it was fear. When the military finally touched down on the academy grounds, the once pristine campus looked like a war zone. Scorched soil, broken drones, the faint smell of ozone. And in the middle of it all, the crucible blackened, silent, but still standing. Colonel Davies stood at the landing pad to greet them. 2 black transport helos bearing the insignia of the Department of Defense and the Joint Special Operations Command. The same world Anna had walked away from years ago. The first to disembark was General Marcus Rain, tall, clean-shaven, eyes like glass. Behind him, a team of analysts and uniformed officers, tablets in hand, cameras already documenting every inch of the site. Davies saluted. "Welcome to the academy, sir." Rain's reply was curt. "Report." Davies handed him a datapad. "Unidentified drone swarm, hostile, 48 units neutralized, no casualties." Rain's gaze shifted to the building behind him, the crucible, half in ruins. "And who authorized the activation of a live EMP defense grid inside a populated training facility?" Davies didn't answer immediately. He looked over his shoulder toward the glass observation deck above the control room, where a lone figure stood motionless. Rain followed his gaze. Her. He started walking before Davies could respond. Inside the control room, Anna stood at the main console, repairing a damaged relay circuit. The faint hum of power returned to the walls as she worked, her movements calm and methodical. She didn't turn when the doors opened. "I see your methods haven't changed," Rain said. His voice was even, sharp. "Still loud," she replied without looking up. He gave a short, humorless chuckle. And you're still insubordinate. Anna closed the panel and finally faced him. Insubordination saved 200 cadets last week. He stepped closer, boots clicking against the floor, and nearly fried the entire academy power grid in the process. I contained a threat that command didn't even detect, she said evenly. Maybe the grid wasn't the problem. Rain's jaw tightened. You always did have a hard time following protocol. And you always mistook protocol for purpose, she said. For a moment, silence, the kind that carries years of unspoken history. He studied her, the carbon fiber legs, the faint scars along her jaw, the calm that unnerved even seasoned soldiers. You shouldn't be here, he said. After Spartan Hammer, you were medically retired. You signed a non-disclosure agreement. I didn't sign away my conscience, she replied. He smirked faintly, still quoting philosophers in a war zone. Anna crossed her arms, still pretending you're not one. Rain's gaze hardened. You broke a chain of command. You weaponized an academy simulation system. You exposed classified tech to cadets. I taught them survival, she said quietly. Something the command structure seems to forget every time it builds a new doctrine. He exhaled through his nose, stepping closer. You don't get to rewrite doctrine, Anna. I didn't, she said. They did, I just reminded them why. He looked around the room, taking in the sight of the rebuilt control interface, the cadets outside cleaning debris, the instructors working shoulder to shoulder without shouting. The academy had changed. He could feel it. Davies entered behind him. General, if I may. Not yet, Rain said, eyes still on Anna. What's your endgame here, Sharma? Anna's expression remained neutral. To make sure the next generation doesn't die believing noise is strength. He stared at her for a long moment, then said quietly, You've always believed in quiet wars. Because they're the only ones that last, she replied. He turned to Davies. You'll have my report in 24 hours. In the meantime, she's suspended from active instruction until further notice. Davies stiffened. Sir, with respect. That's an order, Rain said, and it's final. Anna didn't argue. She simply nodded once, eyes calm. As Rain left, Davies turned to her, frustration written across his face. They're trying to bury what you did. She met his eyes. They can bury the records, not the results. For the next week, Anna disappeared from the training schedule. The cadets noticed immediately. The silence she'd once used as a tool now felt like an absence. Evans tried to keep morale steady, but even he could feel the void. It's like the air changed, one cadet muttered during drills. Vega, now officially lieutenant in training, stepped up. She led the exercises exactly as Anna had taught her, quiet, controlled, efficient. And yet, something was missing. Late one evening, Vega found Anna sitting alone near the firing range, her prosthetics detached for maintenance, the cold metal glinting beneath the fluorescent light. Vega approached slowly. Ma'am, they said you're suspended. Anna didn't look up, so they did. That's not right, Vega said, her voice tight. You saved this place. Anna smiled faintly, but there was exhaustion in it. Saving a place isn't the same as saving its politics. Vega sat beside her, unsure what to say. After a while, Anna spoke again, quieter. They're afraid of what they can't control, and they can't control what they don't understand. Then we make them understand, Vega said. Anna turned her head slightly, meeting the young woman's fierce eyes. Careful, Lieutenant. Revolution is louder than it looks. Vega's reply was soft but sure. Then I'll make it silent. That earned her a genuine smile. The following day, Command convened an official review inside the Crucible. Rain, Davies, and several officers sat at the main table, while cadets observed from the upper decks. Anna stood in the center of the chamber, the same place where she'd once humiliated Evans and reshaped the Academy's history. Only this time, It was her on trial. Rain began. Instructor Sharma, by your own admission, you executed an unsanctioned override of restricted systems, endangering personnel and property. What do you have to say for yourself? She didn't look at the officers. Her gaze went to the cadets in the gallery above, silent, waiting, watching. What I did, she said slowly, was necessary. You trained them to follow orders. I taught them to think. That's the difference between soldiers who survive and soldiers who die in confusion. One of the officers scoffed. You're not authorized to redefine training doctrine. Anna looked at him calmly. Neither were the men who invented the doctrine you're defending. Rain leaned forward. You're not here to lecture, you're here to answer. Anna paused, not in defiance but in thought. The truth is simple, she said. You can punish me, you can delete the files, you can strip my name from the reports, but you can't unteach what they've learned. You can't silence understanding once it starts thinking for itself. Her words hung heavy in the chamber. Then unexpectedly Evans stood. With respect, sir, she's right. Rain turned sharply. Sergeant, you're out of line. Maybe, Evans said, voice firm. But she's the reason any of us are standing here today. I've served under a dozen commanders who talked about strategy. She showed it. If that's insubordination, then maybe we need more of it. A murmur spread through the gallery. The cadets, hundreds of them, stood in unison, silent, a wall of quiet solidarity. Rain's expression hardened. This isn't a popularity contest. Davies stepped forward. No, sir, it's proof. You can't fake that kind of loyalty. For the first time, Rain looked uncertain. His gaze flicked back to Anna. You've built something here. I don't like how you did it, but I can't deny the results. He sighed, the sound of a man losing to logic. Effective immediately, suspension lifted. Continue training under Colonel Davies' oversight. Anna didn't move, didn't react. Understood, she said simply. Rain turned to leave but paused at the door. You were always impossible to silence, he muttered. Good, she replied. It means you're still listening. That evening, the Academy's mess hall was louder than usual, laughter, stories, relief. But at one table, away from the noise, Anna sat with Vega and Evans. You realize what you did today? Evans asked Vega. Vega smiled faintly. I followed orders. Anna smirked. Whose? Yours. The three shared a rare moment of quiet laughter, the kind that comes after long survival. Evans leaned back, shaking his head. You've changed everything, you know that. Anna's voice was soft. Not everything, just what needed to be. Vega looked between them. What happens now? Anna glanced out the window. The night beyond the glass was clear for once, stars reflecting off the silent crucible. Now, she said, now we rebuild quietly. Later, alone again in the observation deck, Anna watched the cadets disperse below. The rebuilt crucible shimmered under the floodlights, stronger now, forged by both destruction and rebirth. Her reflection in the glass looked older, wearier but calm. War had shaped her, the Academy had changed her, and silence had defined her. She spoke softly, as if to the ghosts that followed her. They'll outgrow me, that's the point. A faint echo seemed to answer her, the metallic hum of the crucible's power core spinning back to life. And in that sound, she heard what every true warrior eventually learns. That victory isn't about noise or medals or the weight of command. It's about the quiet continuation of what you've built, carried forward by those strong enough to listen. Because sometimes, leadership doesn't need to shout. It only needs to stand still long enough for others to find their balance. Why did the soldiers still whisper her name years later? Not as a myth, not as a ghost, but as a method. 5 years had passed since the night the crucible went dark and came alive again under Anna Sharma's command. The world beyond the Academy had changed. Conflicts had evolved. Wars weren't fought in open deserts anymore, they were fought in shadows, with silence, precision, and intelligence. and somewhere in the archives of the Department of Defense, a doctrine had been quietly rewritten. It had no signature, no name attached, just a new line added under operational ethics and engagement philosophy. Victory begins where noise ends. No one claimed the phrase, but everyone knew where it came from. The new recruits of Fort Althea, the Academy reborn, were different. They moved quietly through corridors that once echoed with shouting. Their instructors didn't bark orders, they whispered intent. The Crucible had become more than a simulation arena. It was now a living experiment in perception and restraint. And at its heart, walking slowly through the rows of cadets, was Lieutenant Commander Vega. Her voice was calm, measured, almost haunting in its similarity to the woman who had trained her. "You don't win a battle by killing faster," she said during her first briefing. "You win by outlasting noise. Remember that." The cadets nodded, their eyes focused. Some of them had never heard of Anna Sharma. Others spoke of her as legend, the instructor who turned a training facility into a fortress and herself into a doctrine. Vega never corrected them, but she never glorified her either, because she knew Anna wouldn't have wanted that. It was during a night exercise, silent infiltration, low-light navigation, that Vega first realized how much the philosophy had taken root. A young cadet slipped during the operation, tripping over uneven ground. The entire squad froze instantly. No one shouted. No one panicked. They simply adjusted, compensated, and resumed their advance. The control deck watched in silence, their vitals steady, their coordination uncanny. Afterward in the debriefing room, Vega asked, "Who taught you that reaction?" A boy in the back raised his hand. "Ma'am, we just listened. You said the battlefield speaks if you don't interrupt it." Vega smiled faintly. That was exactly what Anna used to say. Far away, deep within the highlands of Norway, Anna Sharma sat on a quiet cliff overlooking a frozen valley. She had left the academy 2 years ago, not forced out, not retiring, just fatting away. The prosthetics she wore had changed again, lighter, quieter, more human. But she moved slower now, not from weakness but because she finally could. Her small cabin overlooked the valley below, where the wind carved patterns in the snow. She spent her mornings maintaining equipment for local mountain patrols, her afternoons teaching field medicine to isolated units. Nothing official, no rank, no insignia. But once in a while, she received visitors. This morning, it was a young pilot from Fort Althea, a messenger. He carried no insignia either, only a sealed case and a silent respect. "Commander Vega sent this, ma'am," he said, handing her the case. Anna nodded, motioning for him to sit while she opened it. Inside were datapads, mission logs, and one small holochip labeled Crucible Protocol, Revision 3. She inserted it into the old projector. The hologram flickered to life Vega's face, recorded days earlier. "Ma'am," Vega's voice said softly, "you told me once that legacy is noise unless it teaches silence. I thought you should see what the new generation has built." The recording shifted to scenes from the new academy. Cadets training under minimal supervision. Entire operations run without spoken communication. Simulated rescues conducted in full darkness. Then came live footage, a special operations team in the field, their faces camouflaged, their movements synchronized without words. The audio was almost entirely silent, just the faint wind and heartbeat monitors. Vega's voice continued. "They call it the Sharma Protocol. It's now standard in deep covert divisions across 3 continents. We teach awareness as a weapon, patience as strategy, stillness as strength. You taught us that fear doesn't need to be conquered, it needs to be understood." The recording paused. Vega looked directly into the lens. "You should know, ma'am, your silence became a language." The hologram faded. Anna sat back in her chair, her hands folded in her lap. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the whisper of snow against glass. She smiled small, tired but real. That night, Anna walked to the edge of the cliff, looking down at the valley lights far below. The stars reflected in the frozen lake like distant beacons. She thought about all of them, Vega, Evans, Davies, even Rain. Each one had been part of the noise, part of the resistance, part of the silence. She remembered the first day she had stood before the cadets, broken and underestimated. How every glance had been pity until it became respect. How every doubt had been a spark. And she realized something she hadn't before. Her story hadn't been about revenge or redemption. It had been about translation, turning pain into language, turning silence into instruction. She had never wanted to lead. But leadership had found her, in the moments no one else could hear. A week later, a knock echoed against her cabin door. When she opened it, Evan stood there, older, grayer but smiling. "You found me," she said. "Didn't have to look hard," he replied. "You left a trail of quiet legends." He stepped inside, removing his gloves. "I was in Oslo for a conference. Heard the new cadets are quoting you like scripture." She chuckled softly. "Dangerous habit. They even have a motto. Do I want to hear it?" Evan smirked. "Move like silence, strike like truth." Anna raised an eyebrow. "Dramatic." He nodded. "Effective, though." They sat near the fire, silence filling the space like an old friend. After a while, Evans said, "Do you ever miss it, the academy?" She poked at the fire with a metal rod. "Sometimes, not the noise, though." He looked at her carefully. "You know, Rain retired last year. Word is, he recommended a new ethics review board based on your crucible protocols." She smiled faintly. "Did he admit that?" "Of course not, but the memo had your phrasing all over it." They both laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that belonged to survivors, not soldiers. The next morning, Anna accompanied Evans on a short patrol. The snow crunched beneath their boots as they moved through the narrow trails. The air was thin, the world almost too still. At one point, Evans stopped and looked out at the horizon. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come back after Spartan Hammer?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze followed the same horizon, endless and white. Then someone else would have had to learn the hard way that strength isn't about what you have, it's about what you do with what's left. He nodded slowly. "You always did have a way of saying things like that." "Maybe it's just the silence talking," she said. They walked on. That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the peaks, Anna stood outside again, alone this time. The air was cold enough to sting her lungs. In her hand, she held a small data chip. It contained the next generation of her neural training algorithm, simplified, refined, something she'd been perfecting quietly for years. It wasn't for the military. It was for rehabilitation centers, for soldiers learning to walk again, to trust machines, to rebuild lives without shame. She placed it into an unmarked envelope, addressed it to Vega. No note, no message, just a silent gift. As she sealed it, she whispered softly to herself, "Let them think it's theirs, that's how it grows." She slid the envelope into the outgoing mail case near her door. Then she stood at the window, watching as the first snowfall of winter began to fall, slow, weightless, endless. Every flake caught the faint glow of her cabin light, drifting like memories that no longer hurt. And for the first time in years, Anna didn't feel like a soldier or an instructor or a survivor. She just felt human. Months later, far away, Vega stood before a new class of recruits inside the rebuilt crucible. She held a small metallic object in her hand, a data chip, no markings, no signature. "Before we begin," she said, "there's something you should know." She inserted the chip into the console. The lights dimmed. The holographic walls came alive, displaying terrain simulations more responsive than anything before, adaptive, alive, whispering with wind, temperature, and instinct. The cadets stared awestruck. Vega's voice softened. This system was designed by someone who believed combat isn't about domination, it's about understanding. She looked at the holographic horizon ahead. She taught me that silence isn't weakness, it's mastery. A pause. And the moment you stop needing to prove yourself, that's when you've already won. The room stayed silent for several heartbeats. Then, without command, the cadets straightened their posture, hands behind their backs, not in salute, but in respect. Outside the academy, the wind carried faint echoes across the valley, almost like a whisper. And if anyone had listened closely enough, they might have heard a voice in that wind, soft and distant, saying what Anna Sharma had always believed. You don't need legs to stand tall. You just need reason. Why did the world remember her name long after she stopped speaking it? Not because of medals, not because of battles, but because silence leaves echoes that never fade. It was spring in the highlands when Anna Sharma's story reached its quiet ending. The snow had melted into thin silver streams. The mountains looked softer now, their sharp edges blurred by mist. In her cabin, sunlight filtered through frost-dusted windows. A kettle hissed on the stove. The walls were lined with old mission maps, worn books, and data modules labeled in her careful handwriting. But the air carried something different now. Peace. Anna sat at her desk, reading a letter, one of many that arrived every month from former cadets. Some came from war zones, others from hospitals, some from new instructors she'd never met. They didn't write to praise her. They wrote to say they learned to listen. The letter in her hand was from Vega. Ma'am, the new program is complete. It's already in use at rehabilitation centers across Europe and Asia. Veterans are walking again, not because of machines, but because of belief. You taught me that. You taught all of us that. There's a quote engraved outside the crucible now. Sometimes strength is built from the pieces we were told to hide. It felt right. I hope you're resting. Vega. Anna folded the letter slowly, tracing the edge with her fingers. Her prosthetics had grown old, joints slightly stiffer now, the servos humming with age. But she didn't mind. The body had never been the measure of her. She looked out the window at the distant valley, the same one she'd watched through countless seasons. It had changed color 100 times, yet somehow remained the same. That was how legacy worked. It wasn't about replacement, it was about continuation. Later that morning, she walked outside. The ground was soft beneath her boots, the prosthetics leaving faint prints alongside her cane. The path led to a stone marker overlooking the ridge. There were no dates, no ranks carved into it, just a single engraving barely visible beneath moss. Silence is not absence. It wasn't a grave. It was a promise, a marker she'd placed years ago when she first came here to remind herself that stillness doesn't mean the end. She stood there for a long time, feeling the wind brush against her face. Her breathing was slow, even, the kind of rhythm that comes after years of learning to exist without hurry. From behind her came the crunch of footsteps on gravel. I figured you'd be here, Evans said. She turned slightly, smiling faintly. You always do. He walked up beside her, wearing civilian clothes, his hair silver now. He carried no weapon, no insignia, just the same look in his eyes he'd had back at the academy. They gave Vega her own unit, he said. International Coordination Task Force. She's running cross-border operations, low visibility, high intelligence. Calls it the Echo Division. Anna nodded once, fitting name. She said you'd understand. I do. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the clouds drift across the valley. Evans finally spoke again. She told me about the rehabilitation project. That algorithm you sent her, it's changing lives. Veterans who gave up are walking again. Anna's gaze stayed distant. Good, it's what we should have done from the beginning. He looked at her. You ever think maybe that was the mission all along? She smiled softly. Maybe. Later, back inside, Evans helped her sort through her shelves. Data drives, notebooks, half-completed research. He paused when he saw a dusty folder labeled Spartan Hammer Post-Mission Debrief, Restricted. He glanced at her. You kept this. She nodded. Some memories you don't erase, you just stop fighting them. He opened it gently, old photos, damage reports, lists of casualties. The last image was of her, years younger, lying on a field stretcher, half-conscious, legs gone. He looked at her quietly. You could have died that day. I did, she said softly, just not completely. He swallowed hard, and the part that lived. She smiled faintly. That's the part you're talking to. That evening, as the light faded, Anna sat near the window, writing in her old notebook, not digital, just ink and paper. Her handwriting was still sharp, steady, each word deliberate. War takes time healed, but silence teaches. They call what I built a doctrine. It's not. It's a memory turned outward. Every soldier fights two wars, one outside, one within. The first decides if you live. The second decides why. She paused, pen hovering above the page. Then she wrote one more line. And sometimes, victory isn't about what you gain. It's about what you learn to lose without breaking. When she closed the notebook, she exhaled deeply, as if releasing years she no longer needed to hold. That night she dreamed. Not of war, not of explosions or blood or drills. She dreamed of the crucible, empty, quiet, bathed in pale light. She walked through it without the sound of machinery. No cadets, no alarms, just stillness. And then she heard it, faint at first, then growing stronger. The rhythmic sound of synchronized footsteps. She turned. Hundreds of soldiers, young, old, men, women, walking together through the silence. None of them looked afraid. They moved with the calm, controlled grace she had spent her life teaching. At the front of the formation, Vega looked back and smiled. The same calm, quiet smile Anna had once given her years ago. Anna nodded, no words, just understanding. Then the dream faded into light. The next morning, Evans found her at the desk. Her notebook was open, pen resting on the page. Her head was tilted slightly, eyes closed, peaceful still. The kettle had long stopped hissing. Outside, the wind carried the sound of thawing ice and distant birds. Evans stood there for a long time before finally sitting beside her. He looked at what she'd written, the last words on the page. If silence could speak, it would only whisper, I'm still here. He didn't cry. He just closed the notebook, placed it gently beside her folded hands, and looked out the window at the rising sun. 2 months later, a memorial was held at Fort Althea. No speeches, no anthems, just a moment of silence, exactly how she would have wanted it. Vega stood at the front, wearing a dark uniform with no decorations. She addressed the gathered soldiers in a voice steady and soft. She never asked to be remembered, Vega said. She only asked that we learn. And if we did, if any of us learned anything from her, it's that courage doesn't shout. It listens. The crowd stood in complete silence, the kind that doesn't need applause to feel full. Behind Vega, on the wall of the rebuilt crucible, a new inscription had been carved. Anna Sharma, instructor, soldier, listener. 1959, 2043. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Years later, recruits still whispered her name before training, not as superstition, but as respect. The Sharma method became the foundation of a generation that fought wars differently. Quieter, smarter, kinder. And somewhere, deep in the system logs of the crucible, her neural imprint, saved years earlier during her training simulations, still existed. Not as a consciousness, not as an echo, but as a pattern. Occasionally, when cadets trained late into the night, the lights would flicker, and the intercom would emit a faint static hum. Some said it was just the power grid. Others swore they heard a voice in the static, calm, patient, familiar, whispering the same words she'd once said to Vega under the dim lights of the first crucible. Fear is not your enemy. Listen to it. Then make it quiet. The world moved on. Wars changed again. New technologies, new enemies, but her philosophy endured not as rules but as rhythm. It lived in the steady breathing of soldiers who didn't panic, in the calm before engagement, in the silence after victory, because Anna Sharma had taught them something far greater than warfare. She had taught them how to exist without noise, how to fight without hate, how to win without losing humanity. And though she was gone, the quiet she left behind kept teaching. At the edge of the highlands, the wind moved across her stone marker, whispering through the grass, carrying the same sound it always had. And if you stood there long enough, if you listened with the kind of patience she demanded, you'd hear it faint but certain. A heartbeat, a rhythm, a reminder that sometimes the strongest people aren't the ones who never fall, but the ones who learn to rise quietly when no one's watching. And in the silence that follows, dignity remains.